This is Mr. Gillum, and today we're going to continue to factor and solve polynomial equations. But today, for this section, what we're going to keep on doing is factoring, and today we're going to factor some expressions with 4 terms and some expressions with 2 terms. The only expression we've ever factored with 2 terms has been the difference of 2 squared. Well, today we're going to learn about the difference in the sum of 2 cubes, and also we're going to look at some 4-term polynomials and how to also factor those. Okay, so this is called factor by grouping, and this is used for when you factor expressions with 4 terms. Okay, and so this is brand new. You've never done this before, so it's going to be a little challenging at first. But this little step 1, step 2, step 3 is just kind of something to when you look back to your notes, you can remind yourself of what you're doing. So this should make a little more sense once we get into what we're actually doing. So the first thing, when we have these 4 terms and we're trying to factor it, is we're going to separate the expression into 2 parts, the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. Then we're going to factor mono out on each of those 2 parts that you just separated. The remaining parentheses should be, for this section, they should be the same. Okay, and so what you're going to do is you're going to take those parentheses out, and whatever's left is going to be on the second parenthesis. And I'm just going to refer to that as the remainder. But, okay, that's as extensive as I want to go into that today. So let's just do a few and then it'll kind of hopefully make sense. As you can see, we have these 4 terms here: x cubed, negative 3x squared, negative 16x plus 48. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to separate this into 2 things that I do know how to factor. I'm going to separate it into these 2 parts. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do a change there. Now, the reason I have to do that is this. If I have my x cubed minus 3x squared minus 16x plus 48, and I just separate these ones, that's fine. And these ones like this, that's now saying that this is negative 16x and negative 48. That's not what we want. We just want the negative 16x. Okay, we don't want this to be a negative 48. We can't actually change what it's worth. So make sure you do the change part before you separate into your parentheses if it's subtraction. Okay, so that negative sign just stays with the 16. So do not do this. Okay, that's not what you're doing. All right, so you do the change, and then you factor both the first term and the second term. Okay. In the first, I notice that x cubed minus 3x squared have an x squared in common, so I'm going to mono that out. I'm left with x minus 3. On the second, sorry, I shouldn't put a plus there yet. I notice that they have a negative 16 in common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a negative 16 out. And that leaves me with x minus 3. Okay, now this is the key step right here. Okay, separate it. I don't think that's going to be too much of a challenge. Make sure you do the change if it's necessary. All right, and then this is the part where it's hard to understand. We started with 4 terms, now we have 2 terms. And remember, terms are separated by addition or subtraction signs. So now we have 2 terms. Looking at these 2 terms, what do they both have in common? I noticed that they both have an x minus 3 in common. So this is the higher level thinking part. X minus 3 is what they have in common. And so after I take that out, I'm left with x squared minus 16. So that's what's going to go in my second parenthesis. Okay, so this term and this term just had the x minus 3 together. That's what they had in common. That's what I pulled out. It's right there. Okay, the remainder, x squared minus 16, is what goes in the second parenthesis. Now, since we've been factoring for a while now, I know this is really x minus 4 times x plus 4. Because it's the difference of 2 squares, it's a minus sign in there, it has to be minus. So x minus 3 times x minus 4 times x plus 4. That's going to be my simplified factored term there. All right, so let's look at another one here and just keep in mind all the stuff we just did. I know it's a lot, and I know it's new, you've never done it before, but these aren't so bad after all. So we'll start by separating. And I need my change because I only want the negative 9. X. I don't want both parts to change signs. I just want the negative 9x. So make sure that middle sign is always a plus, and I'm going to factor both parts. I see x squared again I have in common. That leaves me with x plus 7. And then in the second one I have a minus 9 in common. So I'm going to go ahead and take negative 9 out. And that leaves me with x plus 7. Now if you're concerned about your mono out, you can always redistribute and make sure you get the same thing. Okay, I'm pretty sure I factored both of these right. Now looking at this term and this term, the part that they have in common is actually the whole quantity x plus 7. So I pulled that out of both of them, and what's left is the x squared minus 9. So that's what's going to go in the second parenthesis. And I'm just going to continue on. X plus 7, x minus 3, x plus 3. That's my leftover stuff. So here's my completely simplified expression right here, factored out. All right, we're going to do a couple more of these to get the hang of them. I'm going to let you loose on a few of these here. All right, and these aren't as bad because I noticed right away I'd already have these plus signs here, so I don't have to worry about a change. So I'm going to go ahead and separate the first two and the second two. And I didn't change because I already have a plus sign in the middle, so that's good. I'm just going to factor out, once again, x squared is what they have in common, so that leaves me with x plus 1. Okay, it doesn't leave me with just x. A lot of people just put the x in there. It's x plus 1. Remember, you need to distribute through to get back to your original. Okay, so x squared times the quantity x plus 1 plus, and there's nothing to actually factor here. All right, and so what I'm looking at is this term and this term. Okay, now this is a great example because you do this kind of the same thing twice here. Similarly to this first part that I factored, I took an x squared out and I was left with a 1. In this term and this term, okay, what I have here is I have an x plus 1 in common, but my remainder is x squared, and really there's a 1 in front of here too, kind of like there's a 1 in here that went down right there. So this is x squared plus 1 left over. Okay, and I know it's going to be tempting to try to do a difference of 2 squares there, but that's not the case. It's a sum actually, so we cannot simplify past that. All right, so let's look at another one here. I have to separate. Whenever you see 4 terms today, you need to separate them into 2 parts you know how to factor. And once again, we're going to factor out. And on the second one, there's a 2 in common. And looky there, like magic, they both have an x minus 3 together. So I'm going to take the x minus 3 out. Okay, those are gone. And then the remainder would be x squared plus 2. And that's my solution. Okay, there's nothing else I can factor there. That's my expression completely factored. All right, and there's one more thing. Well,